order our agenda tonight, as we always start our meetings, please remember to keep our vision of inspiring all learners to be engaged and successful. Our mission, provide an enriching environment of all the learners. And our core values are respect, integrity, students first, and excellence. So let's keep that in mind as we go through the agenda and make decisions throughout the evening. So, guess next I need approval to approve the agenda.
Motion to adopt agenda.
Thanks, Brent. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Hearing and delegations, there is none at this point. The consent items, you should have all received those Friday in your board packet, and I hope you had a chance to look them all over. I don't know if you have any questions, but I did get to look at the invoices, and they are all together excellently, and we have the additional ones are in front of you that maybe were added here just recently that maybe you didn't receive over the weekend, but otherwise everything is in order.
I will also do kind of a end of the year financial reports during my superintendent's report to review after the certified annual report that was submitted.
A motion to approve consent items.
Thanks, Brent. Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Thanks, Tom. We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We talked about this month that we do under communication to the board, get our buildings assignments for this year. So I don't know if anybody's had a thought about that. Andrea couldn't be with us tonight, but she said she's done high school and middle school, was it? So any other building than those, but she would be up for whichever.
I'd like to do
So
high school.
does there anybody have a preference on some building assignments?
I'd like to do high school.
I
Usually do two in the high school, two in
Yep.
the middle school, and then one in each elementary.
One in each of the elementaries. Yep.
I'll do the high school if Mr. Owen.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. We have the high school then. Anybody else that may have much of a difference? Well, we need to speak up, or just we can do some assigning. So what'd you have last year, everybody?
Bryant.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Jay is going to
I've had middle school and high school.
Well, it seems like you need an elementary.
I'll take an elementary.
Lucia or Bertha?
I don't care. Lucia.
All right. Thanks, Todd.
Did you say Jay?
Bryant.
And Andrea said she's had high school. Why don't we have Andrea maybe do Bertha, give her an elementary?
So I'll do middle school.
Okay. I'll do middle school also. And then Brent, I guess that might leave you high school?
Yeah, that's what I said
He
10 minutes
started it
ago.
off.
Oh, sorry, I missed you. That's my fault then. I didn't hear you.
We're good, man.
Then we're really good.
Okay.
Glad it just worked out.
Yeah, meant to be.
Meant to be. Better hearing maybe. So, thank you, everyone. And we'll get those out to the principals of each of the buildings so they're aware too. So, okay, well, let's move into our superintendent's report.
3 different things I'm going to talk about in the superintendent's report. Like I said, a little bit of a financial review, starting with our solvency. Insolvency ratio is something that, both things I'm going to show, solvency and the UAB are 2 financial health indicators that a district use. The unassigned and assigned fund balance divided by your total general fund revenues minus AEA flow through, that equals your solvency. Measurements, the IASB would say 15% is considered excellent, 5% is considered good. So in that range of 5 to 15% is what we're looking for. Ending FY22 at 13.68%, with the unassigned and assigned balance of $2,697,000. That's cash. That's money that we had. So we're solvent. We're very good. Our solvency will change really quickly on July 1st as the fund balances for Laverne also become our fund balances. And that's how we've talked about we'll deficit spend for a couple of years. We'll spend more than we bring in. That's never an easy feeling, but our fund balance will dictate that that's something that we should do. So we'll look to do that in FY '24 and probably '25 as we're moving ahead.
So how do you correct that if you're spending more for a few years?
How do we correct it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're negative, and then, yeah, we've talked about that before. If you have money, you should spend it, you know?
Yeah.
Spend it on kids' education, but then how do you stop
Yep.
spending it?
It's a really good question, Brent. It's something administratively I've already talked to them about. You know, we already do have the budget that probably matches those dollars. And then over the next 3 years, you know, through attrition, you know, those types of things, there's some adjustments that we'll make. And we're prepared to do that, planning on do that. We also did some big one-time purchases like curriculum. Remember last year, we approved a number of different curriculums, over 200 and some $1,000 worth, which, you know, that's not gonna be every year. You know, so those things eat up some of that expense, and we know that already.
And this is just general fund, correct?
Correct,
Yep.
just general fund. Moving into the next indicator, the unspent authorized budget. I usually just say unspent balance or UAB. You know, this is not cash, this is spending authority, okay? So it's how much you could spend in addition to your cash. A minimum of 10 to 15, not to exceed 25 are some recommended numbers for that. Our UAB is 18%. It's actually like 18.8, I think. Last year was 19. The UAB is $4,536,000. So you can see our number actually went up from last year, but so did our authorized budget, so the percent is slightly down. Another factor that you typically look at, again, you have to have a UAB, a positive UAB, in order to deficit spend. So you don't want this number to go down because it's gonna allow you to spend right at and never go over. And that would be really dangerous. So you watch this thing, look for its trends, and it can decrease and we're fine. Like if you looked at those indicators, minimum of 10 to 15, not to exceed 25, you know, we're at 18. It's a good spot to be. What drives all that? Our certified enrollment. October 1st, which was on the weekend, so October 3rd is the actual count day. So on October 3rd, that's when we submit our files. The official count takes place. You don't certify that until what would be October 15th, which is Saturday. The 14th is Friday. So by the 14th, actually Thursday, we will certify ours. But these are the numbers as they are right now. They could change one or two, but really not much. Our total school age students is up 17 from last year. Our certified number is up 9. The number of resident students attending our district is up, and the number of open enrolled students is up 11. I believe 155 open enrolled is the largest the district has ever had in its history. Our certified number over 1,300 would be the biggest we've had in some time. Whole grade share 55, similar to what we have. That goes to 0 next year because those kids that become part of your certified number. So we'll see some things kind of shift and change from this year to next year, as well as our dollars. Open and roll out 88. A question was asked of me I was talking to one of the service groups. Do we have kids that open and roll out? Yes. They asked where from. I said the outer edges of our district. You know, as we've become very, very large geographically, there's certain areas that it might make it's certainly a shorter distance for them to attend a different district. That's where makes up a lot of our open and roll outs. Certainly not all, but a lot of them for sure.
So you said our whole grade share is gonna change, but our open and roll out would probably change for next year also then.
Whole grade share, so those are the 6th through 12th Laverne kids.
Right, but
So that'll go to 0. There won't be any more whole grade share kids.
But we'll pick up their open and roll out also if they have some.
Nope, because they'll be in our district.
But they're right now in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People who are open enrolled out of their district, yes,
Yeah.
that would add to our number.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sure they have some open enrollments.
Yeah.
I will say, adding Laverne, I would anticipate would make our open enrollment ends go down, because we do have a number of kids who open enroll in from Laverne who aren't whole grade shared.
Elementary kids.
Yep. So just some shifts in numbers really is all it is. This number, certified number will increase. You know, where I think we built our models with a 40, I think is what we said one time. And then just keeping it there. Any questions on certified enrollment? Our UAB numbers, where they're at? Those are very healthy indicators that we have for UAB as well as solvency. Our certified annual report FY22, that's all loaded, and there's still some things I suppose that are out there, but pretty much closed the books on FY22. Last thing I have is the Iowa Association of School Board Convention. That annual convention is November 17th at the Iowa Event Center in Des Moines. The delegate assembly is Wednesday, November 16th. There's 3 keynote speakers this year. Adolph Doc Braun, Celeste Headley, and Cindy Solomon. Usually it's a very good convention. I think there's always something to take from there and bring back here. If you're interested, let Lisa or I know, and we can get you registered. We do have some hotel rooms for Wednesday night if you need that as well.
Got a few reserved ahead just in case.
Tom, anything more to add on the convention?
Well, there is, on the 16th, we do have the delegate assembly, of course.
Yep.
But there's other workshops occurring on the 16th. And the largest attending workshops on the 16th every year is school finance workshops. We have 3 of them that day. School Finance 101, 201, and 301. I don't think it's important that board members know how to put together a school budget. But I do think it's important you understand the terminology used to attain a workable school budget, unspent balances, cash levies, etc., of how the process works. So if you can get down there on Wednesday, the 16th, I believe the 101, 201, 301 start around 9 o'clock in the morning. If I recall right, same time as delegate assembly.
Assembly will start at what, 9, I'm sure?
Last year I took, 9 o'clock.
Yep.
9 to 11:30 and 1 to 3:30 for all the finance classes. There's also board secretary workshops for SBO credits, if you need SBO credits. And it's, they're good workshops, and I've seen former students of mine come in for School Finance 101. I mean, it's incredible what they're teaching these people on these school budgets, because it's so darn easy for the budget to go south. It only takes a couple years and things get really pretty testy in school districts. So if you have a chance to get down there Wednesday to school finance issues, finance classes in the afternoon, it's well worth the effort. Then Thursday, the traditional conference, and should be a good one.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah, so please just make sure Lisa gets aware, is able to get us registered. It's easier to go through Lisa and get it all registered.
And we do have in our agenda to appoint our delegate later on
Yep.
tonight too.
That'll be a little bit later on, yeah. All right. Anything else? Any questions? We'll move on to administrative reports, and I see tonight we have Mrs. Eischen with us tonight to give us a little bit of fall data updates. And she has some handouts for us.
That way you don't have to squint.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Carter, can you either go to your email or somewhere where I sent that?
Yep.
Thank you. I couldn't link it in. So I tried to come visit you fall, winter, spring to talk about some data things. I know we talked this summer, or kind of late August, at the retreat on some Iowa assessment data. This is something a little bit different. This is our fall universal screening kind of update. Last year, to kind of sort of kick this off, and you can keep it going, Mr. Carter, talk to you a little bit about all the pieces of the puzzle, which comes together to make good decisions based off of the data that you have, because we have a lot of it, and we have to kind of think about where or what we use when we use it. Assessment happens for both teachers and students, so it's also kind of a time to reflect on teachers teaching and also students learning, because both need to be responded to. So we need to make responses to what we see the kids doing, and then teachers need to make some decisions based off those kind of determinations, and that's what we look at fall universal screening for. But it's really important to think about it from the student level and also the system level, because kind of the last big part of it, you can keep clicking, Mr. Carter, is that not only are we looking at decisions to be made for students, but what needs to happen across the system to continuously improve. Because a lot of these assessments are just kind of snapshots of where kids are at on kind of any given day on any given subject area, but over time, they really do tell a pretty good story. So that's kind of all the different data pieces we use. The one that I'm going to be showing you today, kind of where we're shaking out this fall, is our universal screening data, and the questions that we kind of use to focus this is how healthy is our universal core instruction, meaning just the general instruction our teachers provide to students in most of the core content areas. How healthy is that? Of course, we want it to be good, healthy, strong instruction. But we also can look at this for, that would be from the system level. We also look at this at the student level to see who's potentially at risk. And notice that potentially is kind of emphasized because, again, any given day, it's one assessment. We don't think that they have a ton of risk just because of one piece that's there. And then the next click, Mr. Carter will show you, these are what we use. We use an assessment suite called FastBridge that the state of Iowa has been using for probably 8 years now. And those are some of the different assessments that we use within literacy, math, and then social emotional. So we give students these assessments, teachers kind of look at some of the pieces from it, and one other piece that we do with this is then, if we find that students are potentially at risk, what do we need to do to dig deeper? Or, if at a system level, we find maybe there is some parts of our universal instruction that aren't as healthy as we'd like them to be, we might want to dig a little bit deeper and kind of ask some questions. So it's kind of just a little bit of the background about what we give and what we kind of are trying to ascertain as we look at some of this data. Because I know we hear kids or people say a lot, oh, we assess kids a lot. Yep, we do, but we also need that to be able to make some of these timely decisions. And we know that things are only as helpful if you can find them. And so some of the pieces that we put together to organize this. So on the first click, I have a universal screener that you don't have handouts of because it eventually can get into individual student data, which should be shared. And so these are just kind of some screenshots of some things. But I have been collecting this for about as long as I've been associated with Algona, including in my previous job. So this is kind of nice that I have multiple years of data to kind of show you guys. Everything in the black below that is data starting to go back, probably 7 or 8 years now. So we've really been able to kind of look and see not only cohort kids, but what a certain grade level has been doing since we've been giving this assessment, which is really nice to be able to see for patterns and trends. But this is kind of one of the first things that teachers and sometimes groups will look at is just this little snippet of a snapshot. But then from there, this would be the system piece. Every grade level has one of these sheets, and again, you can't read it because there are student names on it that I've tried to obscure as best as possible, but we get kind of a one-page overview of a whole grade. So that is all of a grade's students in one spot. They're kind of sorted. And then from there, you can even click on a link that takes you to an individual teacher's classroom. So we can really dig into what are we seeing across a whole grade, and then what might we be seeing in an individual teacher's room. And so all of that kind of flows together to make some decisions. And we even have started to make some grade level overviews to even track some of our interventions and supports that are happening. And that just becomes kind of another link that we put on and go, all right, so here's all the students that are either receiving Title I support in the elementary or receiving some support at the middle school or high school. So that's kind of how we organize it all, because if we don't have it in one spot, it probably won't get used. So Now, on your handout, you can look and see this is what our percentages are for this fall. Everything's there except high school math. We're testing this week. Since we have a guest speaker in on Thursday, that kind of pushed us back just a little bit. But we will be doing the A math assessment in high school this week, so that will be filled out by the end. But you can just take a minute to sort of scan through where we're at.
I have no idea what those numbers mean.
That's okay, so.
Those numbers up there, like,
Yep.
is that proficient?
Yep, so these are the number of students who met the benchmark, which would be proficiency in this case. On the ones in the blue, those are the tests that we report out on. Every school has to indicate one of the assessments. There's a lot of assessments that are available to us in this assessment suite. The ones that backfilled in blue are the ones that we kind of use to have be our standard one that they report out on, so we're always looking at consistent information, that it's not just a test that changes all the time. And so for our, most of our students, that's A reading. The 2nd through 12th grade goes up through that. Kindergarten and 1st grade, we have to use the early reading. That the state tells us that that's the one that we have to use for that. Similarly for early math. We don't have to do as much, the state doesn't get involved as much in the math side, but it's just a really good practice, so we just kind of use some of the same ones that we do for reading for math. So those are all of the students who are proficient. The numbers that aren't bio proficient, that's the number of students who are currently deemed persistently at risk in that grade level. And we kind of want to track that for reading over time, just to kind of see how are we kind of doing with students who do start to show some at risk. And to be persistently at risk, you have to have not been benchmarked for like two testing periods in a row. So it's not just like it's oh, you didn't make it, you have issues. It's over time. So we can kind of see how that starts to dwindle down. The little up and down arrows, that's indicating if that percentage was up or down from fall of last year. So this same time period, a year ago.
For grade level, not for kids.
And for grade level,
Yeah.
not a cohort class, just for grade level. On the reading side, the ones that are in white, CBM and auto, I think it's important to include those because we do give kids that assessment as well. And we just don't want to disregard that data, even though we technically report out on the A reading. That's still some really good data to help us make some decisions. A lot of that has gone up, same way on the other side with the CBM math. The middle school really did kind of a little bit of a focus on getting kids to be a little bit more automatic with their math. And even though those numbers look still kind of a little low, they were in the teens last year. So they really have increased from some efforts that they've put in.
So Mrs. Eishen, can you tell us, so on you got 2 reading assessments here,
Yep.
but I know they measure different things.
Yep.
The A reading that we report on measures.
So that's kind of a general measure. There's a lot of things on there from comprehension to like the morphology of words, how words come together to make meaning. So it's kind of a lot of general parts of reading, sentence structures, those kinds of things. Whereas the CBM and the auto both have more to do with CBM is a timed read where students read out loud and a teacher scores. Auto reading is done on the computer, but the screen will go away after like 5 seconds. So you have to be able to identify if you hear a rhyme or if you hear a part of a word rather quickly, so that it can kind of judge how quickly you're able to make all those connections in your brain and how prepared you are to be a reader.
So the CBM and automaticity is fluency or speed?
Yep, more around
And
the area of
this is
fluency.
comprehension?
Yep, A reading can kind of be seen as how you put it all together, how you put it together to become a reader or a literate person. And the same as with A math and CBM math. A math is general math, there's story problems, there's some just basic computations, there's lots of different kinds of math related things, graphs, things like that. And then CBM math, that is like just facts, kind of what you maybe be used to, only it's how quickly you can recall those. And both have a place.
So this is gonna sound like a real a-hole comment, but 60% is not good,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
So-
60% of our kids are proficient, like, if that was a score, we'd be getting a D as a district.
And
Yes.
we'll show you some comparisons.
Yeah, we're showing some comparison in a moment. And to give you an idea about what is considered healthy, healthy is considered 80%, and that means because 80%, if you have your students to 80% proficiency, it means that the other 20% you can provide interventions for, you can support through special education or interventions, and it doesn't stress your system. So if 80%, which we want more, right? But if at least 80% can be served in just general education, you have systems in place to support the other 20. When it starts to get to places like 60 and below, it becomes a stress to the system, right? Because all of a sudden, we've got a lot of kids that need that extra, and then if you keep giving extra, it's hard to go forward. So, yep, there's some areas within that definitely we
I
want
mean,
to
I'm
see.
not trying to be a jerk,
No,
but I'm
no.
just thinking, that's just,
Mhm.
your comment right there
Yeah.
is well taken, because if you have 40% of your kids, so 4 out of every 10 kids in a classroom are not proficient, and then you have to do that, you don't
Mhm.
have the aids to do it, and then those 60% that are proficient
Yep.
are gonna stay proficient but get a little better until
Yep.
the rest of them catch up.
Yeah, but we don't want to get into a major stress to the system, and so that's why we always want to say, let's look at some core instruction things first. We knew last year we identified some areas in the lower elementary with some phonics and phonemic awareness that wasn't as strong. We put some things in place to do that. Kind of excited to see what will happen with the new curriculum and some things dedicated to that. So that's one of those system level things that we kind of look at to see over time where it goes. But
And remember that she's showing you screener data today, which is done throughout the year, which leads to our assessment that we reviewed all of that data in the summer. That's the one that gets reported out for our Iowa School Performance Profile and creates our ESSER designations and rankings and so on. This just, like she showed on the one, helps us know where individual kids are so we can provide what we need to, and if we have big system issues that we need to look at. But the next screen, are we ready for that?
sure.
Compares us.
You don't have that quite yet, sorry. That's not on your backside, sorry. Well, you can look up here for that one. I did take some comparisons from some local. They're all within probably a 60-mile radius. And like us is what I'd say too. And so that's kind of where we compare with some other grade levels. Couple things I want to point out about the asterisk by kindergarten. It's really tough for me to look at any local data because kindergarten includes kindergarten prep, because in all of our state data, kindergarten prep, it kind of like doesn't exist. You're either kindergarten or you're preschool. And so I've parsed ours out because I know who our teacher is and I know who our students are, so I can do that. I don't know what the other districts, if that includes kindergarten prep and kindergarten. So that's why that one you kind of got to take with a grain of salt there, because it could be kindergarten prep and it could be their regular kindergarten. So that one's kind of hard to do comparisons on.
And the reason I brought up the comparisons, Dr. Owen, from your question, you're right, 60% is not good. Although there's oftentimes, like there is here, trending data for certain grade levels. As you can see, 62 in first, that's not good. Although, if you can see, it's like that across the board. Ours isn't isolated to be that.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying, it's proficient is not even high proficient, it's just proficient. It's
Mhm.
Yep.
sort of the minimum standard that we want
Yep.
these kids to get through this grade and graduate with these basic skills to be able to do, read, math, and across the board. I'm not trying to pick on us as a school district, but it's just, gosh, and I realize that even just in general population, an adult population, right? I mean, you're gonna have, X amount of the population, 15% of the population, that's just not gonna probably be, your workers or, careers, those sorts of things, but gosh, it just, from the outside looking in, 60% seems low. You know, and it's not, obviously, we're kind of benchmarking, you compare those 4 districts the same size of ours, but.
There's good things to note that you don't see right here, because I try to keep it short for Todd. I know you like that one, I know. But you certainly could go back and look and see that current second grade there. I believe their last year's score coming into first grade, I don't think was at 50%. I think it was like at 45. That those would have been our kiddos who missed preschool and that had to learn to read with teachers with masks on, and there's a lot of things. And again, it's not really an excuse for it, but if we were to trend back, that's why there's some things that we can dig a little deeper when I said we look at some of those diagnostic things to see where do we see some things that might either explain it and help us just better understand what we need to do to move forward. But if it is something that we see over and over and over and over again, that's when it tells us we probably got to do something at the system.
So how detailed can you get into this, I mean, just for my own kids, right? I mean, I have a kid that struggles in fractions, right? You know, if they took a test, they would be
It would.
hard. And you go back, and we had to go back several math levels to get her
Where you want her
where
to
she
be.
should have been, you
Mhm.
know? She was in 5th grade, and she was functioning at a 3rd grade math level. So
Yep,
we
and that's
had
similar to what we do with that too. We kind of go back, once it kind of red flags that, hey, there might be a concern at a student level, then we employ some other kind of things. We've got some other additional little quick checks or assessments to kind of figure out about where are you, so that we can sort of tailor that plan for what then do you need. Sometimes you do have to go back to a grade or 2 below, but you hope that it's just filling holes and gaps and not something that was really missed, but just, oh, I didn't quite get it then. And that's what you have kind of your intervention teams for, to do some of that work.
I mean, how often does this come back to even just personnel and teaching, you know? Is that, I mean, does it come back to that sometimes, that like, we're talking to our employees and saying, you're just not doing?
Yeah, if you, let me go
I
back.
mean, I'm sorry for asking a lot of questions, but
Go
I
back
just-
to this
it's
page
just-
here, when she
Concerning.
described it. Again, you can't see this, and we know that, that's intentional. But the way she organizes this data is, you know, this is a whole grade level here. Then it drills it down a little bit farther to, you know, we can see this individual students in that grade level, and then we can drill it down farther to the sections, you know. So the way that we look at the data, we drill it all the way down to the sections of how this section scores in math versus this one, which then creates, you know, you could create areas of growth, or it might be a reflection of some of the students in the class, but we drill down that far in how we have it organized.
A school could drill down to teacher performance levels. We have not, there hasn't been the need to necessarily do that, because there's nothing that glares that it's one particular area, but you certainly could, by the way that that's set up to do.
And isn't
So-
it safe to say your fall testing is typically your lowest, because the learning, you know, what % of the kids sit at home on electronics all summer versus participating in the reading program and, you know, and things like that, so there's a learning loss over the summers.
Yep,
So it's-
I
But
actually.
is that taken into consideration?
The test does account for that, right? But I also think that a lot of times your fall screening is almost kind of like the summative data from the year before, really from the grade level before, because it's really kind of that culmination of what you learned in that year before coming to fruition. And the other thing to sort of note too, especially for second grade, that's kind of why there's a little bit of a darker line there. It does change from an assessment where a teacher gives an interview to something that the students are doing on their own. So that's kind of important to note too, that there is a shift in the assessment there. And that's why a lot of times in second grade we see kids really bounce up too, because it was the first time that they've taken an assessment like that. And so there's a little bit of.
And on this assessment, the benchmarks are not fixed either. They'll
Yep.
continue to raise throughout the year. So when we do our winter screening, the benchmark is higher than where it was in the fall.
At home, yeah.
For growth that you should make in a typical, whatever that grade level is. And then on these screener sheets that all the teachers, you know, get access to, I go through and put what the growth was, or I got great helpers that help with some of that too, but if they made growth, or sometimes didn't make growth, sometimes it's hard for kids who are really excelling to make growth, but we still want them to, because we want everybody to continue to grow. One final piece there, that is on the back side of your handout. The state has given us some really good data warehouses to look at this because they really believe that it's important enough to look at data like this, and so they've given us some tools to make it a little bit easier. This comes from a system called Panorama, Iowa Student Success, so I'm gonna briefly explain what you see on here too. This is just for literacy, and this is to fulfill the early literacy law, the Eli law, that became a law in, I believe, 2013. And so right now, they only collect that data through 6th grade. I will be a happy person when they collect it beyond 6th grade because it does the work for me and I don't have to calculate it myself going on. Well, the state will eventually get there, but that law focused primarily on K through 6. So what you can see across the top is this really then starts to break it down into some subgroups. And if we're really living that vision that we have of meeting the needs of all learners that we have posted all over the school, we have to look at subgroups because we have to make sure we aren't losing any of our groups of students. I've just pulled out here IEP and free and reduced lunch. Those are our some of our bigger subgroups. I also put just the persistently at risk and at risk just to always kind of keep an eye on that too, because those are students who usually go into our kind of intervention programs, and we want to make sure we have a strong program for that too. But this just is another glance that kind of shows you, here's the ones that we've screened, which means we actually give the assessment to. And then of those ones that we screen, here are the ones that meet benchmarks within those subgroups. And broken down by building and then, together as an elementary cohort. So I know it's a lot of numbers, and I am starting to track, again, that black and white there. I am starting to kind of keep track of what those scores were over time for us as well, just to see if there's anything interesting that starts to trend from that, if it's worth digging into finding out some answers either why, on the positive or the negative. One thing I thought was really cool last year at this time, the K-8, the percentages of student on an IEP, we were at 16% this time last year. This year we're at 13%. So a few less students on IEPs, so that was interesting. But that's kind of what we get from this sort of report. We don't want to lose subgroups. We don't want to forget about certain groups of students in the big scheme. And if Andrea was here, I know she would say, so what do you do with this data? So to wrap it up, we do a lot with it. From the student level, of course, we do a lot with our intervention groups at the elementary and middle school. The high school is very new to taking this. We gave it for the first time last winter. So hoping to kind of think about how that can work into some of the intervention times, the TAS time that they have at the high school level, just how to do that. There's some management things that just go with that, but we'll come up with a plan for that. Rise time is what they call interventions at the middle school. So a lot of it is used for that. It's really important for us to reflect on effective core instruction, and so some of this pattern and trend analysis, I will bring this to leadership teams. Wednesday, our elementary leads are meeting and reading and math. We're gonna take a look at this just to kind of, what are some things you notice? And then we also use this to make connections to other assessments. So when I showed you guys our ISASS scores in August, what's that mean compared over here, right? So do these tell us the same things? Do they tell us other things? Were they similar? Were they different? They really kind of work together without even being assessments that mean to work together, but we have to make those connections for people to see that. So doing a little bit of showing how these can kind of predict and how we can intervene early so that we don't have surprises on those bigger high stakes tests. Anything else? Lots of numbers, I know.
Well, either way, it's good to have the numbers in front of us so we can kind of see, and we'll learn each time you bring it to us, I'm sure. But as Brent said, I hope the winner gets a little bit. I see a lot of little down arrows that kind of make me nervous.
No, I'm not trying to be negative. I just think that as an outgoing district, I mean, I know you would agree, I know Joe would agree too, that we need to have higher standards, and I think it's good that you're here in the district. I know we've talked about it for a long time, because if you weren't doing this, we wouldn't have this data. So, I mean, it sounds like there's ways to recognize it and to improve and to get it better, but it's-
Everyone is looking at it, right? That's
I
the
just-
first thing.
What was our first year doing this?
there's some work to be done, you know, just
In the elementary levels, it would have probably been 2016, 17. Middle school started about 4 years later.
2020 in that area?
Yeah, 19, 20, yep. And then high school started this last year,
Okay,
so.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
So what is, I mean, not even just what you can do with this data, right, you know, as Andrea would ask or whatever, but, I mean, is there something that we should do as a district to say, this is our goal?
Yeah.
You know, to say, we want 80% proficient, or we want to see, you know, these numbers improve, you know, years by 10%, and then if we're not doing it, then we need to hold ourselves accountable? I mean, is that something that,
Yeah, and we produce some long-term goals for the state every year that are, it's to get to that 80 number that she talked about, because once we get to 80, it's not a systems issue, it's just working with individual children.
and the reality is, that's probably what it's gonna be. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
there's gonna be some kids that are just gonna
Right,
struggle.
and then we gotta have systems in place for those. Stuff that we have done, that you guys know about, we universally put curriculum and instruction in place in reading that was the same, K-8 for the first time for this year. That's something the district never had. We were different in our instruction, in our curriculum at every single grade level prior to that. We think that consistency in the instruction and the consistency in the approach is something that will help this. We did the same thing in math 2 years prior to that. The high school had been using IM math, then the middle school, but again, our elementaries were different per grade level. So we put a consistent curriculum and a consistent instruction in place. The third step probably towards that is that we aligned all of our content leaders together for the first time, and Mrs. Eishen leads that group. So it's not only that we have the same curriculum and the same instruction, we are working together universally and laterally to work on these skills in reading and math and social emotional, where we establish common goals and common initiatives and pieces of emphasis. So yes, we should establish those goals. It's to get to that 80. I think we're always looking at what we can do in our system. I think what we've done in the district a lot lately that probably wasn't in place before is looking at it as a system, a K-12 system or an elementary system. And I think those are things that we'll see results from.
Do you anticipate in 2 years, will that be a proper or long enough time to evaluate whether the curriculum's helping or not? Or
For sure, probably at the lower elementary levels.
Okay.
We even saw some things that kindergarten teachers did last year. We had subgroups of data in our first grade look higher than they've ever looked before. So we can already see some little, and that wasn't even the curriculum, it was kind of the precursor to it. So I think we'll definitely see some of those pieces. It'll probably take a little bit longer as students go through, because sometimes those holes and gaps widen with every passing year as content gets harder. But we have some good interventions in place too, so I think that we would start to see some movement, especially at the K-1, 2, kind of 3 level. And Brent, there already are some goals that the state provides us with what we should be looking at for appropriate kind of benchmarks, almost like you might say. It's called our healthy indicators. There's 6 of them. It's kind of a desk audit that Mr. Carter puts together, and they have things like our 80% of your students, making proficiency, but there's also one on there about growth. Our so many of your students making adequate growth. At the top of my head, I want to say it's 90%, but I could be a little off, because we want 90% of our kids to at least grow in where they're at, knowing that if some of them started really low, it's going to be really hard to get to 80, in 1 year. Of our students in interventions, do they ever get to a benchmark? 66% is that. So there are some indicators that are already out there for that exact reason, like you just said, of what should be appropriate kind of milestones as we go through. And that panorama system gives us all that. So
Our Iowa performance profile, which Mrs. Eishen actually and I got about 4:15 today, so we've started to dig into that a little bit That takes into account not just one pieces of data, but also growth and a number of different of those indicators and factors to arrive at that indicator or that profile score. I do think that's the best way. It's the best way Iowa's had to ever look at schools wholly and not just individually on snapshot assessments. And that's what we'll bring back to you, and we should have probably at the November meeting.
In the winter and spring assessments on that sheet, I do have a spot, not just for those who made growth, or just who made benchmark, but then also the percent that made growth. So we do start to look at that in winter and spring, because we want to make sure we're keeping the eye on the prize of growth as well, so.
Certainly be beneficial to look this spring and track some of those numbers.
I think this is the best note we've ever had at the board table to see the numbers as well as we have, so it's good and it's eye-opening.
I
And
just
it's
think
needed.
ultimately, it's our job as the board to,
Yep.
and that's why we're here. I'm not,
Yep.
I just,
Yep,
it's
lay down
accountable,
what the expectations are.
yeah, I just think we need to probably put forth
Yep.
some numbers, and, I mean, the 90% growth, I think is really important. I mean, that's nice to see, but to get there.
I think I'm down for May too, right? So
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would love it, another district to have to present numbers and have, that be able to say, well, who's that district up there that's the, you know, the 80%?
Just
And,
strive for excellence.
you know,
Yep.
and then,
As we
say, why
say.
aren't we at 80%? You know, it's,
Yep. Thank you, Janie. It's good
Thank
to
you. It's good-
have all the
good
information tonight.
information.
Okay, we'll move on to the new business, and we start by appointing the new board during the reorganization.
In the general information is the verbiage of the motion that comes from the lawyers, but we need a motion to appoint the 6 members from our board to the initial board of the new district. That method was determined during the petition process, and it's based on population of the 2 districts. So the former Algonah Community School District will have 6 members appointed from this board of 7, and the Laverne, the former Laverne District will have 1 member appointed from their board of 5. So we need a motion to appoint those 6 members today. Along with that, October 24th, the new district will have its reorganizational or organizational meeting that will be led by Susie Mead from the chief from the AEA, because we don't have a president, so the AEA comes in and they run that meeting. That's when you swear in your 7 board members, you elect your president, you elect your vice president, we'll decide on the terms, which year people go off the board, as well as the meeting dates from now till July 1st. So from October 24th to July 1st, 2023, there will be 2 meetings per month, one from the new district and one from the district, the former Algonah district.
I believe that 24th meeting is the earlier one at 5 o'clock.
It is,
Yeah,
yes.
just so everybody realizes that too.
what,
On Monday,
It's 5
the
o'clock.
24th, it's a 5 o'clock meeting.
this month?
Yes,
October
October 24th. Lisa had sent something out in an email showing the agenda kind of already and the time frames. I just wanted to make that aware because it's a lot different times than we're used to for that one night, at least.
Yep.
So, as Joe said, we do need to read the motion that's in front of you there, as stated.
So Laverne will appoint a person?
Yep.
Yes, and they have.
They have.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to appoint Rodney Davis, Jay Limbaugh, Andrea Vinci, Ren Owen, Todd Lawaji, and Tom Nugent to be retained as members of the initial board of the new school district resulting from the reorganization between Laverne and Algonah Community School District.
Thank you, Todd. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Brent. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Gloria is the odd person out.
Yep.
So,
And she didn't go through like this already.
no, I think every one of us wants here to serve, and Gloria kind of
Yeah.
has been on the fence. I even talked to Gloria too earlier about it, so I think you're comfortable with
Yep, I'm fine with that.
stepping down or not being included. Picked last, maybe.
I'll be here till July.
She'll be here through July, though, as both boards meet, so, but we definitely want to recognize her time and all that she's done when she came over when Tyke merged with us. So she knows that.
Yep.
the one board member elected, so, or
Know
appointed.
how this works.
Yep. So, all right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is to appoint IASB delegate, and that would be for the 16th, I believe, for the delegate assembly.
Yep, delegate assembly, November 16th at 9 a.m. Three important roles of this assembly. Number one, to conduct the annual meeting. Two, to set the legislative platform based off some of those recommendations we voted on last month, and to convene the nominating caucuses to select the candidates for the board of directors in our selected regions. So we'll need a nominee.
Again, if anybody wants to, they're more than welcome, but I've done it in the past and would make that date work, so. And Tom will be there also.
I'll be there too.
But he, yeah, in a
If
different
you're
role.
okay being the delegate assembly again, I would vote for you to be our delegate.
love to have you do
We'll make
that.
a
Okay.
motion
Yes.
for you to be the delegate.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Gloria, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, we do have a first reading of board policy changes, but there'll be at least no motion tonight. It's our first reading.
Right, just a reading, no motion. These are board policy changes due to House File 802, which was the transparency.
You
I'm
should have a copy
summarizing-
with you
Yeah,
there.
I do have it all on paper for you guys. I'm summarizing my state of transparency law that was passed by the legislative group last year. Most language changes we'll see work to accomplish two things. Increase compliance with House File 802, and second thing is just increased transparency, which I think that's a good thing. You know, we are transparent, we want to make sure we are, and put processes and procedures in place so parents can look at materials and challenge materials if they choose. The first is Board Policy 40114, employee expression. Employees will comply with the Iowa law to the extent that compliance did not infringe on employees' free speech rights. We did some changes with that already, but that's the addition, and that is a mandatory policy. So these are recommendations in green that come from the Iowa Association of School Board. And then I always put in the note if it's mandatory, if it's not mandatory, or what it is. 4081, this is a long policy. The entire policy needs added. It's licensed employee professional development. To summarize, it's that we will provide professional development for our staff. Policy we don't have, although practice we do follow. But you do have to have policy now for that, where you didn't before. That is mandatory policy. 6021, curriculum development. I haven't read the bullets that we had, which are very similar to the recommended, but have those struck out there, and these are the additions. And again, I would say this policy change represents what we do. Study the latest trends, study the current status of the content and discipline. A lot of it Mrs. Eischen just did for us. Identify content standards and benchmarks, grade level expectations, describe desired learning behaviors, identifying differences in desired and present programs, communicate with internal and external publics regarding the content, involve staff, parents, community members. Those are the additional parts to curriculum development. Again, this is a mandatory policy. The green bulleted items in this case are suggestions for content, and they are implied from the mandates of House File 802. Curriculum implementation 6022, just two additions, that the curriculum framework complies with applicable laws. That wasn't in there before, and that we will provide professional development. Again, that's a part of this, is that we will provide that stuff for staff, which we've always done in the district. 6023, curriculum evaluation. Ensure that curriculum complies with the laws, the applicable laws. That needs to be added as it's mandatory. Some bigger changes here. we had policy in regard to instructional and library materials inspection. We even discussed it some last year. This just goes through that the parents and the guardians of students will be provided access to a catalog of books available in our school library. That is available online for us. It always has been. Electronic textbooks, if we have those, someone wants to see them, we'll provide that. Of course we would. Relevant portions of required print textbooks, anything that our kids would get, if someone asks to see it, we would provide it. So again, I think that matches what we've done, putting it into policy now. Objection to instructional library materials, again, we had this policy in place. Added to that policy is that parents or guardians of students enrolled in the district have the ability to request that their student not be able to check out certain library materials. That's an additional piece, again, of the practice. Parents probably could have done that, but we add that in there, and then there's a form. So I went through this with Mrs. Welly. Parents could say, I don't want my child to read Tale of Two Cities, and we put that down. She said she has a way to actually flag it in her system, so that child could never check out that book. 6053R1, reconsideration of instructional and library materials. This is a complete rewrite. We did have this policy. This was a rewrite of it. This goes step by step. If a person in the community or a family member from our district wanted to object to any materials that were being used, this is the process that they would go through. And ultimately what it is a group is formed within the school, they review the material, and they bring to you guys as the board their recommendation or reconsideration of that material. Very lengthy policy that I summarized there in a few sentences. This last one, 605, this is the request to prohibit a student from checking out. I talked about the policy. This is the form that would be used. So that would be part of our policy. And the last one, school library. The district may provide access to all parents and guardians of students enrolled in the district an online catalog of all books. Again, that matches current practice, but it wasn't in our board policy. So we'll add that to board policy as we already have that posted.
Any questions on the first reading?
I think it's good to give parents the choice, you know, be allowed in education of their kids and.
Encourage it.
Great. What is, I don't know what my opinion about this is, but, so when you're talking about, you know, process to.
Object to a material.
Object, is that like hey, we have this book in our library, we as a community do not even want this available? I mean, is that where this comes from?
Could be. There's probably two ways you could look at it. One is it's a book in the library, or it's an instruction material used in a class. You know, this is a book that we're requiring students to read in 6th grade. A parent objects to that. We go through that process. A group is formed. They review the book. They bring that recommendation to the board. Same thing for an item in the library.
Sure. So somebody could object, and then it would be us as a board would decide we don't want this instructional method or material.
Yeah,
In our
part of this process is a group is formed.
Group, yeah,
That would
for
involve
us.
some staff and parents. They would
But it's a
review
way
the
for
book.
an individual to try to get something removed from the district. Am I understanding this correctly?
Say that again.
It's a way for an individual to try to get something removed.
Yeah, this creates the process for an
Process, okay.
individual to, yep.
Or a parent could opt their child out of any,
They could.
you know,
Yep.
I mean,
That's-
that's already in place, though.
Right.
It is. I think in middle school for sure, I think they give choice of a couple books in some places. And then in the library, you know, now we have, you can simply say, I don't want my child to read this book, and we can ensure that they will not check it out from us.
from our library.
Yeah.
We could get it from a
We
friend or
cannot
something.
ensure that they won't read it, we can ensure that they won't check it out from our library.
you look those over, good, and if we've got more questions, second reading, we'll approve it next.
We'll bring those in November for
November,
a second
yeah.
reading and approval.
Yep. All right, we'll move on then to approve the superintendent kind of goals that we kind of set some last year, and I think they kind of fit for moving forward even yet,
Yeah,
so.
I put those in your general information. Last year, we had 3 goals that were all based on our district goals. Goal 1 was to manage school operations and resources to promote each student's academic success and well-being. Goal 2 was to cultivate an inclusive, caring, and supportive school community that promotes the academic success and well-being of each student. And Goal 3 was to develop and support intellectually rigorous and coherent systems of curriculum, instruction, and assessment to promote each student's academic success and well-being. Those could be goals. We could go a whole nother direction, and that's what we're doing tonight. In the end, legally, I have to have goals that are based on the standards. That is the part that we have to have.
Well, as we discussed in agenda review, we believe these still fit as what we're looking to do moving forward. So we were comfortable there bringing those to it. And I didn't hear anything from, we had a chance email-wise. I think everybody felt comfortable with them and didn't really hear any other goals. So.
With the next agenda item, the plan is still to have progress reviews in place,
Yep.
which is always a chance to review progress towards these goals, or to simply review our situation and how well we're doing.
We would look at December and April then for progress reviews and the final one in June.
I'll
So,
motion to approve the superintendent goals
thank you, Brent. Do we have a second?
as
Printed,
printed.
read already, yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you, Todd. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. As Joe stated, moving on to set the progress review dates, we talked about looking at December and April for the 2 progress review months, which we done mainly in closed session, I believe.
Yep.
Yep, we do those towards the end of ours in closed session. And then we'd have the final evaluation then in June. So unless anybody has any other thoughts, we just need a motion for that.
I like those dates. I think the service well.
Yep. Is that a motion, Jay? Move
Yes,
forward
I'll
with
make the
that?
motion.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
Thanks, Tom. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Looking to approve a business office position.
Yeah, our business office structure is something
Talk about it.
I've shared in some memos it's
Should
not
have some
allowing us
information.
to be as probably as accurate and as efficient as I think we really need to be in our district. Typically, a district our size would have 3 to 4 employees working in the business office to spread out these duties. We know we never, we're always cited in our audit of having enough employees, and having one more wouldn't change that. But separation of duties is an issue in our office with the demands of payroll for more than 250 staff members and in a district with over 1,400 students. I don't believe our current structure is sustainable to get the work done that we want to get done, or provides our staff the time to really accurately and effectively to do the job. Those are areas we want to improve in. In the agenda, I've linked some different things. The first is a review of the North Central Conference as well as school our size in Eastern Iowa and how they're organized. That's this document right here. So I put in there school, certified enrollment, how many people they have in their business office, and then what those positions are. Also linked in the agenda, I put information in there about what our current people are doing and what being our business manager and our CA secretary, and then what that would look like if we were business manager, CA secretary, and accounts payable, receivable, and we broke that into 3 different responsibilities.
And as you use forecast 5, you kind of forecast out with this position.
Yeah, I have.
How it's
You know,
sustainable.
that's, you know, anytime we have these positions, we build those in to the model, just like we've done with administrative positions and then even teaching positions to see if it's sustainable, you know, through time. This, I would recommend that the third person adds on accounts receivable, accounts payable, and that position would be on line 11 of our Mitchell System salary chart, which is the same as the CA secretary, with a starting wage of $16.35 per hour and a 12-month contract.
I was looking to do the accounts receivables, accounts payable. Does that take any sort of education or degree, or is that?
I think we can train,
Okay.
train someone interested in the job in our office.
And is this position gonna be paid out of management fund?
No, it'll be paid out of general fund.
General.
I think there is just, I mean, just approving invoices over the years that have and the duties that are just in that office, we've always talked about it possibly needing to be 3, and I think we're getting to that point where it needs to be 3. We've started to overwhelm the staff, couple staff that are in there,
Yeah.
so.
So what changed is my question to this. So it's gone this way for years,
Yeah.
I don't disagree that, but what's changed that's created more work than the previous?
Well, I think it's not more work, it's how we're doing the work. I think as we, you know, attention to detail, you know, we have new people in both those 2 positions. Their attention to detail, it's good, it's what we want. It's creating work that, with less errors, less mistakes, but it takes time to do it that way. And I think doing it in that way is the right way to do it. I think it's the expectation of how to do it. The district, you know, reviewing historically, they were at 4. They moved out here, they went to 3. I think there was a retirement, they went to 2. And then kind of rode that until we had another retirement. 2 is a really odd structure.
So historically, our district has had,
Up to
We've had
4
more.
when they were in CA themselves. They moved out here, they went to 3, and then there's retirement, they went to 2.
Adding this position, we would still continue to have 3 eyes on, obviously, the accounts payable and accounts receivable. So it'll give us more cross-checking to make sure it's done properly, or you'll review it all, obviously.
Yeah, separation of duties certainly improves. It will still show up in our audit, and I think you'd have to have 4 to 5 to not have that, but it improves for sure. I think our accuracy in the work we do will improve for sure, and that's a good thing. It should happen. I think the efficiency and how we're able to do work, obviously, with another person part of the process will improve.
as long as it's sustainable, and it sounds like it is, so I would motion to approve business office position.
Okay, we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
Thanks, Tom. We have a motion and a second. And further discussion, would we go to advertise right away and look to hire right away?
I'll put
Okay.
together job description, post it in-house, out-of-house, and
Okay.
see if we have any interested.
I would say, we've been kind of short a secretary in the high school. Now, do you think you're gonna have a hard time filling this position?
Yeah, it's something we talked about. I talked specifically with Mr. Cecil about different jobs, different commitment into 12-month to part-time. So I was nervous about that too, Todd. You know, we've been trying to fill one position for 6 months and have been ineffective in doing that. Are we now just making that position worse? We do think it's a different pool of candidates.
Okay.
But I think that's certainly a real thing to look at.
So can a few of those duties maybe be taken by this third person? Or do you think there's enough split?
I do think there's enough split. Todd and I discussed this similar, could some of these duties go somewhere else? I think proximity makes that very difficult, to take accounts receivable, accounts payable, have those in another office, I think would be hard to do. And those other offices, they're busy. You know, we haven't filled that position in the high school office for 6 months, although we've had substitutes working in that position. So we've still been doing the work. We just haven't got a full-time person to do it.
Any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second to approve a business office position. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Allowable growth request.
This is an annual request that we have. It's the request for your special ed deficit, which is highlighted, $908,747 is our special ed deficit from FY '22. So this is a request that we may request that through supplemental aid and the cash reserve levy. You always put this in place whether or not, typically, best practice, whether or not you request it or not. You make the.
Seems like we've had a large amount every year,
Yeah.
and it'll never be zero. We know that. And services need to be provided for these kids. But I still find it rather shocking every year it's this large number. And we should be able to, a couple of years ago, we said we can address it and figure out why it's so high. We need to address it and figure out why it's so high every year.
Yeah, Tom, you're right. You know, John Heiser, superintendent in Laverne, one of his responsibilities when he'll come here will be special ed, and it'll be to dig into that deficit, and we need to shrink that. Also historically, special ed weightings, you know, every special ed student has a weighting. There's a 1, a 2, and a 3 level. Those weightings have not been adjusted in over 20 years in the state of Iowa, where certainly the supports that a child needs continue to grow. And I think ultimately that's the issue, but it's really, really expensive for the state to address those weightings. It's probably
I don't want to
hundreds.
see our services decline. I want to see the services provided for the kids. The kids need the services, we need to provide them in district or as we send them someplace else for the educational process. But I just want to make sure we look at this dollar amount
Yep.
and
Yep.
really figure it out, because it seems really high to me when every year it's in that $500,000 and more every year.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? If not, we need a motion then to approve the allowable growth request for special education.
I make a motion to ask for the allowable growth request.
Thanks, Gloria. Do we have a second? Todd then. Thank you, Todd. All right, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. A fundraising request that might have already started.
Yeah, the fundraising requests come to you guys when they get to a certain dollar amount. There was an anticipation that the Student Senate t-shirt sales wouldn't ever get to a dollar amount, but through their first sale, they were pretty high. So this is a request for Student Senate t-shirt sales throughout the year. Their proceeds pay for their leadership conference and other Student Senate events throughout the year.
Had a good sale of them this year.
Coming shirts went well.
All right, we need a motion then to approve the fundraising request for the Student Senate.
I would do a motion to approve the fundraising request for the Student Senate t-shirt sales.
Thank you, Tom. Do we have a second? Thank you, Jay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to open enrollment.
We have 4 open enrollment applications this month. All these applications do meet the requirements for approval. I think there's 2 open enroll ins and 2 open enroll outs.
Yes.
Motion to approve open enrollment requests.
Thanks, Brent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gloria. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So how do you track tuition or whatever when they change? Because now you can change mid-year, right?
Yeah.
Is that just kind of a?
It's all through
Days of-
SRI, student reporting, and
Okay.
it's,
I can see that.
it's a lot. It's
It's gonna be more of a nightmare for
It's,
it.
it's ever moving, ever changing. Just got a message today, you know, we're certifying our enrollment on Thursday. We have an open roll in from one district, but he is here, but the district we have him coming from is another one, so it's unbelievable. And remember, in our number, we have 155 in and 88 out. So that's 200, almost 30 kids that keeping track of all that and the payments that follow them.
Yeah,
you know,
that's the
is
tricky part. Yeah.
a lot of work.
Good question. It's a lot of work. So, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to personnel, and we'll start with resignations.
We have 3 resignations. Kathy Mosley from food service, Kathy Tierbold, middle school teacher associate. Kathy's been in the district for many, many years, retiring at this point to spend some time with her husband, and Beth Charlton from food service and transportation associate.
Need a motion then to approve the resignations.
Make a motion to approve the resignations?
Thank you, Tom. Do we have a second?
So moved.
Thank you, Jay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Then we're on to new contracts.
Contracts. We have a number of contracts, starting with Sherry Monson in food service, Randy Erpelding as volunteer assistant football coach, Lindsay Strucker, teacher associate at Bryant Elementary, Jake Adams as our head girls wrestling coach, Shannon Ducey as part-time custodian. That's paid out of ESSER funds. That is not a general fund expense, and that is just for the remaining of the year. Miranda Robinson, Lucia Wallace, teacher associate, Roxanne Gifford, food service, Nikki Roof, high school girls assistant wrestling coach, Caitlin Teepee, middle school teacher associate, Christy Rasmussen, middle school teacher associate, and Shannon Strucker, middle school teacher associate.
I was very pleasantly surprised to see the associates get closer to
Yeah.
fully staffed, or?
Prior to this, our middle school was 5 short, so I think we filled in 3 of those,
That's awesome.
which is good. Food service filled in some of those gaps too. We're not full in associates, although we haven't been the last couple of years either. It's always a work in progress, but we got some really good people here and I'm excited to get them.
Motion approved, new contract.
Thank you, Brent. Do we have a second? And thanks, Jay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we're at that time for, we need a motion for adjournment. Thanks, Brent. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gloria. We have a motion second. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
That was fair, but it wasn't their homecoming dance this year.
Hadn't had them since I've been here.
They used to